Welcome back to Freisland. Our camera pans from the area we fought before, further down the river to where the Lance have made it to this time. And we've stopped here and begun the video because they've just detected another enemy Lance down the road where that yellow beam is. I'm just quickly showing you here that, yep, everything's carried over from our last mission. The damage, the loss of ammo. Our mechs are not in great shape. We need to make sure that Lionheart and Figment really stay out of the fight this time and make sure that Jims is the one taking the damage because his mech is pristine. We also need to be really careful because the Seer's down to 3 ammo. Because we haven't actually detected the enemy yet within our sensor range, we just know they're in the area, we're in free move mode and I can move my mechs freely without worrying about initiative. Once we detect the enemy, that'll change. And just while we've got this point at the start of the game, I just want to speak about evasion. I mentioned it in the thread, but it's really important, especially in this game, that everyone understands how it works. When a mech moves, after it moves a certain amount of distance, it builds evasion, which is basically how difficult it is to track as it's moving. Each of the chevrons next to the armor value meter for each mech represents a single stack of evasion. So you can see here that the Trebuchet and the Shadowhawk have both built quite a lot of evasion with their moves. The most a mech can have is 6, and each one equates to about a +2 damage difficulty penalty to fire at them, or about 5% difficulty to hit. Having a mech with a lot of evasion is really good because it's just an additional difficulty to hit it. On top of that, you get some pilot skills that help you build evasion as well, although there's, as I said before, a maximum of 6. We have picked up our first enemy contact. I'm just kind of looking at how pretty the map is. And it's just as we move into this sort of area of small mazes. We're now getting to the section of the game where we can play in initiative order. And there's basically 5 different levels of initiative, going from 5 to 1. 5 is a special reserved one for a certain type of mech pilot that we're not going to see in this battle. 4 is when the light mechs go, so all the light mechs get a chance to act before any other mech gets to move, which can be really powerful for keeping a light mech alive. But you can also choose to reserve a mech and let it go later on in the turn, which gives you more actions later on to manipulate the order that mechs move in. What me and the AI have done here is we've both reserved until we get to the final initiative stage, which is usually reserved for assault mechs, and we're now forced to activate turnabout because we both haven't moved any of our mechs. I'm going to move the Shadowhawk up with Jims in it here to get eyes on this enemy mech, and at the same time I'm moving him far enough that he's going to build up 6 stacks of evasion. I'm just looking here at what torsos have ammo in them, so I was thinking about his facing to prevent damage from an ammo explosion, but unfortunately the Shadowhawk has ammo in both his left and right torsos, so it doesn't really matter which way the mech faces for now, because he hasn't taken any damage. I move forward to see what we see, and the first thing is he detects another 2 mechs in the background, and finally we get visuals on the first enemy mech, which we'll have a look at in a second once the enemy's taken its turn. This mech moves forward, doesn't reveal itself from the fog of war, and fires an LRM barrage on Jims. Thankfully, his evasion is high enough that none of them hit, but you may have noticed that one of those chevrons fell away. Every time a mech is attacked, it'll lose a bank of evasion as sort of represent people dialing in on it. And our first enemy mech here is a Wolverine, which is quite a heavily armored brawler mech. It's got close range weapons in the form of an SRM-6 and a medium laser, and a mid-range weapon in the AC-5. It's also got a lot of armor. It's pretty good at melee attacks as well, though not quite as good as our Shadowhawk, which is actually a monster in melee. Here I'm going to try and shoot at it with the Trebuchet, but the thing I'm worried about is just how many stacks of evasion it has. It's going to be very hard to hit it. Now I realize that 2 of the enemy mechs have gone, so they've only got 1 person left to act. And that LRM-10 barrage leads me to believe that the mech that's left is a light mech. So I'm not too worried about exposing Figment here to take a shot on the Wolverine to remove one of those stacks of evasion and give me eyes on the other mech that moved. So now we can see that our other medium mech that we are facing is a Griffin, which is another popular commonplace mech of the Inner Sphere. It's got a PPC and an LRM-10, and it's okay in close combat. Its biggest weakness is that its armament have minimum ranges. The LRMs and the PPCs have huge penalties to hit at close ranges in this game. I take a single medium laser shot there just to remove a stack of evasion. I wasn't expecting it to hit. That was a bonus. The third and final mech on the enemy team reveals itself as a Commando 2D. The Metal Baby is a bit of a joke in most Battletech games and in MechWarrior Online, but in this game it's pretty scary. The SRM-4 and the SRM-6 that it takes can deal a lot of damage, especially against mechs like our Trebuchet that have no armor left. On top of that, it can build up 6 stacks of evasion very easily, and with a clever clever commander, utilizing the initiative system to make sure it takes 2 actions before the enemy get a go, it can backstab with those SRMs very easily. I take a a speculative LRM shot at it, which does a little bit of damage, and also reveals the fact that that little shield it has next to its name, which a few other mechs have, are showing that that mech has cover. It's in a forest, which means some percentage of shots will hit the trees, so it takes 25% balance damage from all attacks, which is why this rocket's only did 3 damage rather than 4. I then take advantage of the initiative system to jump the Firestarter back from its exposed position before any other mech gets a chance to move. The AI has already reserved the Commando for later in the turn, so it's back to me, and I decide to reserve Nasir so that he doesn't do anything yet. Again, me and the AI just keep reserving, and then the AI decides to move. It makes a medium laser shot against the Shadowhawk, which unfortunately fails to render, but it misses. The other thing that comes up here is that it gains this solid shield next to its name after it fires, which means it's got a special pilot skill, which grants it 50% reduced damage if it doesn't move on its turn, which is quite scary. It turns the Wolverine, which is already a powerful mech, into an absolute tank. We also realize at this point that that is the mech that the pirate captain is piloting. Griffin makes a PPC shot against the Shadowhawk, and it demonstrates just how good evasion is. The Shadowhawk has been standing there, it's taken 3 rounds of fire, and it's taken its 3rd round of fire here. Still hasn't been hit by any shot that's been fired at it. I now sort of assess the battlefield and have to decide which of these mechs is my biggest threat, and at the moment it's that Commando. If that Commando gets in among the Trebuchet and the Firestarter, which it has the speed to do, the weapons that it's carrying have enough damage to really cripple or destroy those mechs. On top of that, the Griffin has an indirect fire weapon and a long-range weapon, so it can actually snipe with both of its weapons using the Commando as its eyes, so we need to take that out of the equation as well. I Alpha Strike the Commando because there's no reason not to. The Shadowhawk is oversynced as it is, and an Alpha Strike from it is never going to overheat it. And that removes one of its stacks of evasion. All the enemy mechs have gone this turn, so I can just do whatever I want and not worry too much about them taking advantage of my move until next turn. I'm just moving the Urban Mech forward. Nasir's so slow, it's going to take a couple turns before he's actually into this fight, and I just guard him. So I've got the option to give up my attack step to gain that same 50% damage reduction, which I've done with the Urban Mech there. I also make the correct decision here. I almost move the Trebuchet up to make a medium laser shot. I remember the lesson I learned in that last game, and I move him back. And make a much more successful LRM attack against it. Now we're back to the start of the round. The AI goes first, and it charges the Commando in to make an attack against the Urban Mech, which is a huge mistake. You can see there that only 1 missile left, and if that mech hadn't been braced, it would have taken double the damage it just took. I go to take a shot with the Urban Mech, but a 55% is not good enough to use one of my AC-10 ammo shots. He has 2 stacks of evasion, so if I make 2 attacks against him, he will lose that, and I'll gain an extra 10% to my chance to hit. So I'm quite happy to just make an Alpha Strike with a Firestarter. Although I do forget to turn a medium laser on from last turn. I'm just trying to get through the game a bit too quickly. There's been a few people asking why the Firestarter's in the game if it's an anti-infantry and anti-tank mech. I promise you I'll show you why it's insane in a later game. I don't really get the chance to make it shine here because it's got too little armor for me to really risk it, but it has its place and it's ridiculously strong. The Wolverine makes a strong attack against the Shadowhawk, but we're in cover, we've got lots of armor, I'm not too concerned about it yet. I actually bring the Shadowhawk around to fire at the Commando because of all the weapons I have left, he's the one I don't mind missing too much, and I want to get rid of that last stack of evasion. I do turn off the LRM-5 though. And we get a decent attack. He strips the armor from the last torso. Next, the Griffin goes, and exactly what I was fearing it would do happens. It makes an indirect fire LRM attack against the Firestarter. Luckily, only a couple of missiles hit, but that could have been a lot worse than it was. The Aeromech now has a 75% chance to hit, which I take. And destroy the right arm and right torso of the Commando, effectively neutering the largest part of its armament. Because I'm on the right-hand side of it, I realize that an attack I make here, well, if it hits the right arm or the right torso, that damage will instantly be transferred to the center torso. So I decide to go for the medium laser attack here, hoping to kill the Commando quickly. Which is exactly what happens. Now it's 2 versus 4. the next decision I have to really make is which of the enemy mechs is the most dangerous. Which one do I need to take out of the equation first? The Wolverine maybe isn't the scariest in terms of armament, but it's going to be very hard to kill because of bulwark, whereas the Griffin really has a high damage potential with that PPC. I now realize that the AI is gone, so I can do what I did earlier and jump the Firestarter into danger to see what the situation is and then jump it out next turn before they have a chance to react. Both of their mechs are bulwarked, which is frustrating, but I decide to just taking shots at the Griffin. Figment is performing really well this game. She's pretty much hit with every important attack she's needed to. I make a decision here that I might regret later, which is to move the trebuchet up a little bit. And the reason I do that is, you're going to see it in a second, but there's a little lake at the bottom of the screen here. And if I stand the trebuchet in that lake, it can actually gain a bonus to its heat sinks. The LRM-15s are too hot to continually fire both of them at the same time. That lake will allow me to do that. And that was actually a really good barrage. The problem was the guarded state has reduced the amount of damage considerably. All I'm really doing this turn is taking pot shots. The other thing that guarded does is it actually makes your mech stable. So all of the mechs on the battlefield have quite low pilot skills, which means it's quite easy to knock them over. Basically, that yellow bar that's under the Griffin's health there, that's the stability meter, and whenever it takes a kinetic attack, that builds up. And if we pass the little marker on that bar, the mech becomes unsteady, and if it takes any additional stability damage at that point, it will fall over. The pilot will take an automatic hit, and the mech will be moved down the initiative placement by 1, meaning it acts later next turn. When a mech is knocked over, you can make cold shots against it as well. And just what I said earlier, I'm going to jump the Firestarter out of harm's way before the enemy mechs get to take a turn, keeping it safe and undamaged. And as usual, I reserve this here until they can be useful. Wolverine's moving up. Quite a nasty hit to the left torso, and one of those SRMs hit the cockpit, which means Jimmums is our first injured back warrior. And unfortunately, when we get out of this game and I resolve what happened to him there, he gets broken ribs, which means he's going to be out of action for quite a while. But I'm going to play it as though Jimmums has seen red here. He wants to get that Wolverine back, so we switch targets and we're going to attack the Wolverine. It hasn't got bulwark this turn, which means my attacks do full damage, and I want to take advantage of that for as long as I can. I move here just for the 3 evasion, and I'm hoping I get it behind it for an attack, which unfortunately isn't the case, but that was the plan. I'll put that attack down to the fact that it just got injured, because it was terrible. Also, the building decides to explode. AI makes a bit of a mistake here, I think. It attempts a point-blank attack with the Griffin with weapons that have penalties to close-range hitting, so it just misses with everything. I try and move the trebuchet into the water, but I haven't got quite enough movement points to do it this turn, and fire. So I move it onto the mud as well, which will just give it a 50% reduction in stability damage that it takes, as the mech kind of sinks into the mud and gets stabilized by it. Mud also reduces your movement by moving through it, which is why I can't get into the water and fire. And I decide to take an attack on the Wolverine. However, if I fired both LRMs, I'd overheat. And it's a decent sandpapering of armor. Now Nasir can make an attack and not worry about any retaliation because he can get to safety next turn. I do only have 2 shots left, so I want to make sure they count before I take them. I've got an 80% here, so I decide to take it. It's not fantastic, but he does hit the leg, and if we destroy the leg, we knock the mech over instantly and basically kill its movement. So I'm not too upset about him hitting the leg there. And that's exactly what I was talking about. Jump in, take the shot, Pop-Tart back into cover. This is where light mechs can really shine in a situation like this, especially when I have more activations than my opponent. The AI decides to take a melee attack against Shadowhawk, which the Wolverine's pretty good at, with a 70 damage attack that strips off torso armor. But the thing about the Shadowhawk is I don't think there's a better brawling medium mech in the game, at least in this game, with its 85 damage melee attack. And that's because it has 2 battle fists, so it has 2 close combat weapons essentially. I think it goes for a backhand here. Yes. And that strips all of the center torso armor from the Wolverine. putting it in a significant risk, because actually we've got the same armor configuration now as Figment does. The Griffin here moves back with a sprint, and my thought process was, it's moving back so we can take PPC shots without a penalty. What I wasn't thinking was, is the AI hunting my trebuchet? I move the trebuchet into the water to make it nice and cool, and I fire both my LRM-15s at the Wolverine. This is me just showing you that water increases heat sinking. That was a really good barrage. Pretty much every missile that hit the rear right torso. I almost go for a death from above attack here, and then realize at the last second that Figment's lost her right leg armor, and if she tries for a DFA, she will probably destroy her own leg. There is a pilot skill you can pick up that reduces the damage that you take from your own DFA attacks. It's pretty good if you're going to mech like the Firestarter. The reason the Firestarter is good at melee attacks for a light mech is that most of its weapons, the MGs and the Flamers, are classed as small weapons, and small weapons will fire when you make a melee attack. A mech with lots of small lasers is very scary in melee, because a small laser in this game only does 5 damage less than a medium laser. That little noise you just heard is the game warning me that that jump would overheat my mech. I jump back here and hope to take a medium laser shot, but mess up, because any shot I take will overheat the Firestarter, so I just decide to guard it out.
Yeah, sounds good. Good idea.
The Wolverine tries to flee after losing its torso. There's a little bit of a visual bug there. And the AI is running a bit scared because it decides just to guard. However, the Shadowhawk's just going to chase it down and hopefully kill it with a rear torso hit, because both of its torsos are lacking armor. It's a big hit from Jimams, but unfortunately it destroys the leg, which is fine. It knocks the mech over and trades back an injury, which unfortunately might cause us trouble with Comstar for injuring the pirate guy. All the mechs in this game have enough guts that they can take 3 hits before they die. And here's my big mistake. I let the Griffin get a shot on the trebuchet, and it takes out our entire left torso. That means we've lost a ton of LRM-15 ammo, an LRM-15, and a medium laser. At this point, I'm thinking, what the hell do I do to get the trebuchet out of dodge? So I just decide to move it. But because I'm greedy, and I make this mistake a lot, I decide to take another LRM-15 shot at the knockdown Wolverine in the hope that I can kill it by doing a cold shot to the center torso. A lot of the missiles do hit the center torso, but it's not enough to pierce through all of the internal structure it still has. Now I'm looking to bring the Urban Mech up to get the killing blow, and I do have a 75% chance to hit, which I think is worth taking. This is the last shot that Nasir has with the AC-10. I'm just having a look at my target modifiers here to see, is it worth taking this attack? Additionally, because it's a cold shot, it's actually got an additional penalty to hit. And he hits but doesn't destroy the mech. The last person who can go here is Figment. He can't get close enough to get a small laser attack. So I jump Figment forward. Actually, I just run her forward. Turn her medium lasers back on. And I've got 60% chances to hit, which aren't enough. However, there's been enough damage done to us, and we've dealt enough damage that our morale gauge has filled up. And I'll go into it in more detail, but basically I can make a focused attack, which spends all of our morale and gives her 95s to hit. Hits the center torso and kills the Wolverine, meaning we're just down to the Griffin. It also means we've captured the pirate captain without killing him, which hopefully will mean we'll get a bonus from Homestar.
What's up, Commander?
The Urban Mech moves up, ready to engage the Griffin next turn, although all he has left is a small laser. First thing I do is sprint the trebuchet out of danger zone. I'm really, really upset with myself that I let it get attacked. It's going to be a very expensive mistake. The nice thing about it running away and losing the LRM, I guess, is that we don't have to worry about overheating anymore. And then, just the same thing, I'm going to sprint the Shadowhawk up so that I can start shooting at the Griffin next turn. Without a spotter, the Griffin's in a really bad position because once I get close, its weapons aren't going to be worth it. The PPC and the LRM just won't work in close combat. They do actually have a minimum range where they can't fire. It takes me a second to realize that it's my turn again, and I just decide to reserve and see what the Griffin does.
Got it. Stay and put for now.
I do have to say the PPCs look pretty in this game. And they look better than that in some of the videos that Harebrained Schemes have revealed since this release of the beta came out. There's been a lot of little tuning done to some of the graphical VFX. Never not Alpha Strike is my new motto. And you can see that the Griffin has already lost a lot of center torso armor.
I hear ya.
I bring the Firestarter up. It's only got one shot left in its flamers. You only get 3 shots per battle because they are that overpowered. I just haven't been able to abuse them yet. And really, we're droids, we're close here. We just need to take this Griffin out and the game's over. As long as I don't make any more huge mistakes, we should be good.
Standing by.
And here I just take a speculative LRM 15 shot. I'm actually almost out of ammo for the LRMs. If I'd had both LRM launchers still, I'd have run out of 2 attacks. Should fire 30 a turn. And that was a pretty good attack. Most of the LRMs hit. The problem with the long-range missiles really is that you're going to hit all over the body of the target, and quite often you just end up sandpapering armor instead of being a decisive attack to one location. He decides to move forward and engage in close combat, which is probably his best bet considering the rest of his weapon loadout. And the Shadowhawk has taken a lot of punishment this game without really being affected in any way. I decided to open up with a melee attack from the Firestarter, and here you'll see that it can attack with its small weapons after taking the melee attack. I think if you were able to refit that mech with small lasers to replace all the flamers and MGs, it would be absolutely terrifying in close combat.
I'm here.
And this is me just trying to see like a melee from a different location than right in front. The Griffin is turning out to be a little bit more resilient than I was expecting it to be at this point.
Something I can do.
And I jump the urban mech forward so we can make a small laser attack.
Here we go. Piece of cake.
Which tickles it a little bit. Finally, I just move the trebuchet a little bit out of line of sight just in case the Griffin decides to turn around and kill it with a direct fire. I just want to say, I really like the visual effects of the sunset here. That's enough kinetic damage to actually knock the Griffin over, which is an instant pilot injury, and it moves it further down the initiative track, which means all of my mechs will get to go before it gets a move next turn. So I'm pretty confident I can kill it here before it gets to do anything. It takes me a second to realize I need to reserve before I can use the trebuchet. I debate going for a cold shot on the head, but decide on the center torso. I've got quite a low chance to hit the head without a contacting skill. And we finally strip the armor from that center torso. Next up, I tried to give Nasir the glory with a small laser attack to the center torso, but he decides to hit the shoulder instead. Next on the list is Figment. I almost make another melee attack, but because she's lost all of her flamethrower ammo, I decide to go with the medium laser simply because I can make a cold shot with them, whereas I can't with a melee attack. And unfortunately, I don't know what's up with her, but she decides she doesn't want to shoot. Doesn't want to aim, I should say. I do go for the close combat attack with the Shadowhawk, and there's a special animation for close combat attacks on knockdown mechs. We get the stop. We take off the left arm, which and the left torso, which unfortunately doesn't reduce the effectiveness of the Griffin in any way, because all of its weapons are on the right-hand side. This unfortunately gives it a turn, and it has morale, and it makes a focused death from above attack on Figment's Firestarter, knocking her over, destroying the right leg, stripping almost all of the remaining armor from the leg, and injuring her. Which is pretty grim, and a huge mistake on my part. I do like to see the AI going for Well, I'm fucked. I'm taking you with me approach to this fight. I decide to go in with a melee attack with the Seer, and he actually destroys the center torso with his head charge. And that is the end of the Pirate Captain's Lance. And we've got a mission successful and can move on with the thread.